If your paddle looks like you dipped it in a pool after just one game, this guide is for you. Today I want to talk about sweat in pickleball and how we can mitigate it. For the past couple of years I've been playing first badminton and now pickleball here in Vietnam, and it's super hot, it's super humid. I usually play around midday with no aircon and no fan, so I've picked up a couple of tricks over the years. But before we dive in, let's look at the sweat tier. In tier 1, the warm-up glow, you're slightly sweaty, but still looking fresh. In tier 2, the mid-game mist, you're starting to drip, but things are still manageable. In tier number 3, the full court monsoon, your shirt is soaked, there's puddles forming, and your paddle is slippery. If you fall into tier 2 or 3, stick around, I've got solutions. Let's look at this as a pyramid, starting with the bottom layer, sweaty accessories or your quick wins. Let's start this list of quick wins off by looking at t-shirts. I'm sure you've already changed your everyday t-shirts for sports t-shirts. And over the years, I've tried a bunch of different ones. The label always looks kind of the same, more or less 100% polyester, but once you start sweating, things are totally different. To cut to the chase, I have found this brand Delta Sports here in Vietnam to make my absolute favorite t-shirts. Super soft, super thin, the sweat doesn't linger, even after washing. Of course, I still need to change t-shirt after say an hour during a 2 or 3 hour session, but I don't think there's any way around that if you're playing in a hot environment. Moving on, we have headbands, which I found useful for avoid getting sweat and hair into your eyes. And I know a lot of players like wristbands. Next, we have handle grips, which is my favorite item on the list of quick wins. Most pickleball players seem to prefer these tacky PU overgrips, but when it comes to sweating, I have found that even say the Yonex dry super grab just doesn't make a difference compared to towel grips. Now towel grips come in a thick and thinner edition, and I imagine many players will probably prefer the thinner option because pickleball paddles tend to have a thicker handle than other sports, so they can be difficult to grab around. If you want to take things even further, you can absorb a part of the sweat by using talcum powder or grip powder like we know from badminton and tennis. You just apply it in your hand if you're playing with towel grips. If you want to take things even further and your budget allows for it, get 2 or 3 of the same identical pickleball paddle, apply the exact same grip and switch between games so that the other ones can dry off. This has been a huge win for me, but it does require that bit more budget. I've seen some players use gloves for PU grips or a cloth to wipe off the PU grip with to keep the tackiness. And I've seen some players use raisin bags to help absorb the sweat. I haven't tried any of those options, but they might be worth experimenting with. I love these handle grip options because they're so affordable, yet they make such a big difference to your game. Next, let's move on to your feet. Sometimes I've found myself slipping within the shoe as I'm playing, and if there's anything that kills confidence, it's that. I've found this happens more often for me in lightweight shoes with a more basic insole as opposed to the more comfortable, more stable, heavier type of shoes. They typically come with an insole that has some of this wavy stuff under the toes, which seems to build some resistance against the socks. I've also found that socks can make quite a difference, and I tend to prefer the thinner ones as opposed to the thicker, softer ones that absorb sweat more. To finish off this section before moving on, towels, hats if you're playing outdoors, electrolytes and general hydration are of course important points as well. If you like this video, a sub to the channel would be great. Next, let's move on to the second layer, game specifics. In the second layer of the pyramid, we're moving on to things that require more practice, but also give us more benefit in terms of limiting how much sweat is impacting our game. Let's first start out with footwork and movement, which comes down to a few different things. One being, what do you do in the corners? How do you technically do a lunge the most effective way? How do you move around between the corners? And how do you recover between shots so that you're not always on the back foot? To build on top of that, we have reading the game and anticipating what our opponent will do next. And that means, for example, considering, are they doing a short swing? Are they doing a huge, big backswing with more power? Do they have a habit of using shots that are very powerful? And to take that even further, we can consider tactics. We know that the longest you can move on the court is diagonally from one corner to the opposite one. So for example, if you're at the rear left corner and you want to do a cross drop shot, are you ready to run all the way up there if your opponent is doing a straight drop back over the net? If you're not, or you don't want to play a very stamina-based, very energy-intensive game, you might play to the middle to reset, or you might play it straight down the line so that you have an easier time following up rather than having to run and be on the back foot again. Finally, we have court position and stance. And these might not feel like they make a big difference, but even slight tweaks can make a huge difference, I found. In terms of the stance, that means being ready, maybe with the paddle up so that you can react that bit quicker, which makes you more aggressive and has the chance of putting your opponent at the back foot rather than you. In terms of court positioning, I found that moving around in small steps all the time can make a big difference as you're imagining what your opponent will do next to better allow you to reach the ball without using a big, say, full stretch that's very slow and means that even if you get the ball back over the net, you're screwed on the next shot. With that in mind, let's move on to the third and final level in the pickleball sweat pyramid. At the third level of the pyramid, we're moving on to long-term off-court habits. I want to start with improving stamina and predictable moves on court. And let's go back to the lunge example. If you know you're going to be using that move on court, how about going to the gym when you're not on court and practicing how to lunge effectively, maybe with some extra weights on, so that when you're back on court without those weights, you'll be moving faster and your body will be using less energy because it's now used to doing that same move with the extra weight. Another option for stamina specifically is just running every now and then, but I have found that I prefer using a bicycle because it's a bit easier on the knees, a bit easier on the ankles as well. I've also found that experimenting with sleep and diet can make a big difference in terms of how much we sweat. Who thought that pre-gaming with coffee, alcohol and spicy chicken would change how much you sweat? Finally, we can also practice getting used to the higher temperatures, practicing playing in the heat, or practicing controlling our breath. In fact, during the pandemic, my friend and I were working out when we suddenly got restricted having to work out with masks on. My friend got the idea that we could look at it as a more difficult workout, kind of like when the Ironmans or those practicing for an ultra marathon go up into the mountains to practice in the thinner air so that when they come back down, they're much stronger. To summarize, we have 3 levels. Level 1, the quick wins, the sweaty accessories. Level 2, the game-specific things we can practice. And level 3, long-term off-court habits. If you like this video, a sub to the channel would be great. Leave a comment and tell me which of these have you tried and which one are you most curious about trying next. I'll see you on court.